Hey, everybody, and welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be looking at a Reddit post that's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
It's about this young woman and something that happened at her aunt's house
Oh, wow.
involving her aunt's husband. And, you know, it, it falls under, I guess, the category of sexual assault.
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really difficult situation, I think.
Yeah. So let's break it down a little bit. So this woman is asleep at her aunt's house,
Okay.
and she's woken up by her aunt's husband,
Mm-hmm.
and he's saying there's a burglar in the house.
Oh, jeez.
And I mean, already right there, you're feeling that sense of like,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, middle of the night,
Right, vulnerability.
disoriented, and there's a potential threat.
Yeah, you're gonna trust someone you think will protect you,
Sure.
especially family.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he wakes her up, and instead of like, checking on her safety or making sure she's okay,
Right.
he hugs her from behind, tries to
Oh.
kiss her neck, and grabs her wrist really tightly.
Wow.
I mean,
Yeah.
that is so far from a normal reaction.
That's a big red flag for sure. And then what does he say?
So when she confronts him about it,
Mm-hmm.
she's like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
He says it was a test to see if she could defend herself.
Oh my goodness, that is such a classic thing that abusers will say
Right.
to gaslight and manipulate and really minimize what just happened.
Yeah, it's like, come on.
Yeah.
That's not how you test someone's self-defense skills.
Right.
And this is where the post gets really disturbing because she mentions that her aunt's husband had previously made jokes about raping her.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, that's giving me chills, just like thinking about it. It's like setting the stage,
Yeah,
desensitizing her to this kind of behavior.
that's a really good point. It's what we call grooming.
Right.
And it's very calculated and deliberate to normalize those actions.
Yeah, and it puts the niece in this horrible position. Like, does she speak up
Yeah.
knowing that it could, like, shatter her family, or does she stay silent and risk something worse happening,
Mm.
maybe to her cousins or even to her?
Absolutely. It's a terrible dilemma. And
Yeah.
so many survivors unfortunately experience this.
Right.
Yeah, and that feeling of being trapped, not knowing who to turn to or what to do.
Right.
It's something that so many survivors experience.
And it's interesting. What she did was she actually reached out to the Reddit community for advice.
Wow, that's fascinating. What were the comments like?
Yeah, there's a lot of support for her, but there's also some really practical advice,
Mm-hmm.
which I found really helpful.
What did they say?
Well, a lot of people were saying you need to report this,
Mm-hmm.
but they were also being realistic about, like, the challenges she might face.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, some people were saying, maybe you should talk to another adult in the family first
Okay.
before going directly to your aunt.
That's a good point because, in situations like this,
Yeah,
it's really common for the partner to be in denial.
right.
They don't want to believe that their spouse is capable of this.
And especially if they're financially dependent on them,
Absolutely.
it's really sad.
It is, and that's why, having a support system outside the immediate family is so important.
Yeah.
If she has a trusted friend, a teacher, a counselor, anyone who can give her an objective perspective
Yeah.
and really advocate for her, I think that can make a big difference.
There were some really powerful stories in the comment section, too.
Oh, really? Like what?
One person was talking about how their sister refused to believe her husband was having an affair, even when she had evidence.
Wow.
It just shows you how deep that denial can run.
It's a defense mechanism, right?
Yeah.
It's so hard to accept that someone you love, someone you've built a life with,
Yeah.
could actually be doing something so harmful.
Another commenter shared this really heartbreaking story about her colleague whose mother actually disowned her
Oh my God.
after her mother's boyfriend tried to rape her.
Oh, that's just devastating.
And it makes you think about the betrayal,
Right.
the long-term impact of that kind of trauma.
Yeah. Those stories really show how abuse just has these ripple effects,
Right.
fracturing relationships and leaving these lasting scars.
What I found really encouraging, though, is that a lot of people were posting resources and support networks.
Oh, that's good.
There were links to hotlines, websites for sexual assault survivors,
Yeah.
even legal aid organizations.
It's a good reminder that even in these dark situations, there is help out there.
Right. And there's a sense of community, like, you're not alone.
Exactly.
But there's another layer to this whole thing that I think we need to talk about.
Okay, what's that?
The aunt's husband has daughters.
Oh, gosh, you're right.
So what about their safety?
That's a really critical question.
I mean, if he's capable of behaving this way towards his niece,
Right.
it's terrifying to think what he might be doing to his own kids.
Unfortunately, the statistics show that that's often the case, right?
Yeah.
Abusers target the most vulnerable people, and children are especially at risk.
And you've got the power dynamics, the emotional manipulation.
Just secrecy. It all creates an environment where abuse can thrive.
So what can be done to protect these girls?
Well, a lot of the commenters were saying you should contact Child Protective Services.
Yeah, but that's a really tough decision because it's such a complex and sensitive process,
Absolutely.
and there's no guarantee that it will lead to a good outcome.
Right. And you also have to consider, the family might close ranks.
Yeah.
The abuser might get more controlling. The kids could end up feeling more isolated and afraid.
So it's like you said, a delicate balance.
It really is, and it comes down to weighing the risks and the benefits and figuring out what's truly best for the children.
Okay, so let's kind of switch gears a little bit.
Okay.
What stood out to you the most from the comments on this post?
I think for me, it was just that overwhelming sense of support for the original poster. People were recognizing how serious this was.
Yeah.
They were offering practical advice and, most importantly, validating her feelings and her experiences.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a good reminder that even in the darkest corners of the internet, there are people who care, who want to help, and who are willing to speak out against abuse. Man, this has been a tough conversation.
It really has.
But I think it's so important to have these conversations,
Absolutely.
to shed light on these dark corners of family life
Yeah.
and empower people to speak out against abuse.
Yeah. I completely agree. And, I think this deep dive into this Reddit post has really shown us how complex abuse is.
Right.
And all the challenges that survivors face.
Yeah.
And how important it is to create a culture where victims feel safe coming forward.
Yeah, and it also highlights how manipulative abusers can be.
Yeah.
Right. Using that test excuse
Exactly.
to just downplay their actions.
Minimize.
Make the victim question their own experience.
And we see how grooming can play a role in this, too.
Right.
Those seemingly harmless jokes and comments.
Right, like it's so subtle.
Yeah, it's chilling how calculated that can be.
It makes you wonder how many people are out there silently suffering because they've been manipulated into thinking it's their fault
Absolutely.
or that they're overreacting.
That's why it's so important to talk about this openly and honestly and challenge those myths and misconceptions around abuse and really create a space where survivors feel heard and believed.
You know what I found interesting in this case was the talk about reporting?
Yeah.
Because you have this tension between the need to protect potential victims like the aunt's daughters,
Right.
but then also the fear of making it worse for the niece if her family doesn't believe her.
It's a tough situation, and there's no easy answer.
Right.
But I think what we can learn here is that silence rarely protects anyone.
I agree. Speaking out, whether it's to a friend, family member, or professional, it can be that first step towards breaking the cycle
Absolutely.
and sending the message that abuse is not okay.
And it will not be tolerated.
The thing that really struck me was that outpouring of support in the comment section.
It was amazing.
It was a reminder that even in these darkest moments, there's hope, there's help,
There are people who care.
and there are people who care.
Yeah.
It was really a testament to the power of community and the importance of reaching out for help when you need it.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay.
I want to leave you with this thought. What can we do as individuals and communities to create a world where abuse is not tolerated
Right.
and survivors feel empowered to come forward?
It's such an important question, and I think it's about educating ourselves and others,
Yeah.
challenging those harmful attitudes and behaviors, and supporting organizations that are working to end abuse.
Right.
Believing survivors, listening without judgment, and just creating that culture of safety and respect.
Well said. This has been an intense but really important deep dive.
It has.
Thank you for joining us.
It was my pleasure.
And we'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic that's sure to spark your curiosity.